Welcome back to a little bit of cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depius. I want to thank you for being here on the first Friday of 2025, getting ready for the final regular season game for the Green Bay Packers. They'll be taking on the Chicago Bears on Sunday. Some rough news this week. I had been expecting it. Sam did not. We had the discussion a little bit earlier this year, especially as this has been going on for quite some time now. It's the Jaire Alexander conversation, and it was announced this week that on Tuesday he went under arthroscopic surgery to reduce pain and swelling in his knee. He will likely be out for the season. It was stated by Adam Schefter on Twitter that he, quote, could make it back for the Super Bowl if the Packers make it that far. So it's pretty much a 99% chance that we are not going to see Jaire Alexander for the rest of the season. That leads us to other questions regarding Jaire's future in Green Bay. But where I kind of want to start this conversation is the way that Green Bay has handled it, as I, throughout this entire time, did not have very high expectations for Jaire Alexander being able to come back and play for the Packers this year. That's kind of just where it started. We knew it was a PCL tear, and it happened right around the same time that we saw it happen with Christian McCaffrey. They immediately sent him to surgery and said he was essentially going to be out for the season. And when it came with Jaire Alexander, he's a cornerback that takes just as much cutting and vertical and horizontal movement as any other position on the field. He doesn't have one of the strong ligaments in his knee. They tried to bring him back thinking it wasn't that big of a tear. They brought him back against the Chicago Bears on November 17th. He only played 10 games before he had to be removed from that, and we have not seen him on the field since. And where I'm kind of frustrated with this as a Packer fan, especially with Adam Schefter's tweet saying that he could make it back for the Super Bowl, which usually happens around mid to late February. So even if we go back to the Chicago Bears game, which was on November 17th, had they gotten that surgery done with the same timetable, I'm not a doctor, I'm just going off of what Schefter tweeted, and Schefter is a pretty reliable source. We listen to him all the time. If they would have put him and gotten him the arthroscopic surgery at that point, there was a good chance that Jaire Alexander would be available for that first playoff game. And I've said this multiple times this year. I think Jaire Alexander is one of the most valuable pieces to this entire team. Without him in that cornerback room, very thin. Right now you're dealing with Carrington Valentine, who actually has been playing well. I'm excited for where his career can go. I was kind of not very excited with the way that he didn't play earlier this season, which was kind of showing you that Jeff Hafley and the coaching staff didn't feel that he was ready for NFL snaps because it was evident that they needed another serviceable cornerback out there. Well, now he is that guy. Now you can be excited and feel comfortable with him. But Eric Stokes is still getting starting snaps on this Green Bay defense. Without Jaire Alexander, you're not going to be able to cover 2 receivers deep or 3 receivers deep. And you saw that exact problem arise taking on Minnesota. Without Jaire Alexander, you can't cover 2 Pro Bowl receivers. And Tom Brady talked about it a lot during the broadcast. If you try to take away 2 of the guys, then Hawkinson's going to be open, or it's going to be the third wide receiver. Like Minnesota always had somebody open because of the talent that they have in their pass-catching room. You're going to run into those problems with these good teams once you get to the playoffs. And I'm not saying that the Packers have a death sentence if they don't have Jaire Alexander, but it is extremely hard for me to see a route to a Super Bowl path without a Jaire Alexander. And I don't know whose decision it was, if it was Jaire's, if it was the medical staff, if it was the coaching staff that decided that we should try to push this thing further and see how Jaire can bounce back from a PCL tear to be able to play instead of sending him into surgery and knowing that there is a good chance that you can have him back for the playoffs. I don't know who that was. So I don't know where to place the blame, but I will say that the way that this was handled, there were mistakes. It is evident, especially with Schefter coming out and saying that he would be available for the Super Bowl. With that timetable, it's actually kind of ridiculous that you didn't put him under arthroscopic surgery when you knew you were going to be taking it very careful with him regardless, because there were these last few weeks where Jaire Alexander has been able to go through full practices and you weren't having him go out there on the field. You might have had him practice, but you knew that you were not going to get a 100% Jaire Alexander, which is still better than most cornerbacks in the league, but you didn't even feel comfortable to put him out there at all, not even to start to ease him back into the game action. You were just resting him, hoping that he could be back for the playoffs. There was a full PCL tear. I'm sorry, like I said, I'm not a doctor. I'm just coming at you with the logic and what has been presented to us as Packer fans, and I don't know. I think there had to have been somebody that knew that it really wasn't going to get better unless you went in and got that surgery. And we've seen some. It's just been weird how they've handled some of these injuries, especially with star players. And it was a couple of years ago, and we had a similar conversation with a David Bakhtiari. He was dealing with the one knee injury, and it ended up being some really, I can't even remember what it was, but it was bad. There was continual swelling. They tried to ease him back in and just let him play when he was able to play. There were some days that were good. There were some days that were bad. And nobody really knew what was going to happen for Bakhtiari. He went under the arthroscopic surgery, got that done, and he hasn't played an NFL snap since. This is a little bit of a different situation for Jaire. It's a PCL tear. Bakhtiari was dealing with an ACL, and in his recovery, there were a lot of complications. And I think some of the symptoms, I think, were arthritic. But with Jaire, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of swelling. He wasn't able to bounce back and play at full speed. So there was, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there were mistakes in the handling of Jaire Alexander, and the reason that he's not going to be able to practice or play at all during the Packers playoff run, which hopefully they can find a way to get to the Super Bowl, and maybe Jaire can show up for that game, but it is going to be a tough road in the NFC. We've seen it, the three top seeds in the NFC that are all going to be ahead of Green Bay. That's Minnesota, Detroit, Philly. Green Bay has played, combined those teams 5 times, and they haven't won a single one of those games. And Jaire Alexander was not able to play in any of the divisional games, those 4 that were against either Detroit or Minnesota. And you saw problems in every single one of those games where Green Bay was not able to cover multiple receivers. So Hafley's going to have to come up with something crazy. You're going to have to see solid performance from Eric Stokes for this team to be able to advance deep into the playoffs. Like, these guys are going to have to step up. I'm happy that Carrington Valentine has been able to step up. My hopes are not as high for Eric Stokes. He has not had an interception his entire NFL career, actually. That was a mind-boggling statistic that I read, but he's not a serviceable cornerback anymore. And Jaire, not on that field. You're losing so much value with what's in the roster. Another conversation that comes with this Jaire Alexander situation is, what is his future going to look like in Green Bay? Now, next year, he is owed a $16.15 million base salary. The cap hit is $25.86 million, and the dead cap, if they were to release him, would be $19.09 million. So the question is, do you think that Jaire is going to be worth $17.5 million cash that you would have to pay him if he were to come back next year? Would you take the dead cap hit? I think the better answer for this situation would be to try to restructure his contract. A lot of Packers Twitter thinks that it's unlikely that Green Bay is going to see a Jaire Alexander out on the field on their defense again. And that's a sad conversation to have, because we've seen 2 all-pro players in the last couple of years be at the top of their game, and them have an injury and have complications after the injuries just derail their careers. And I talked about them just a couple of minutes ago, David Bakhtiari. Not the exact same situation, but a similar situation, where when Bakhtiari was on the field, even when he was injured, was still one of the best left tackles in the league. And even this year, Jaire had been coming off of that shoulder injury from last year. He's been pretty banged up these last couple of years. Hasn't played a whole lot of games, but when he's been out there, he's been great. but it's the complications that are coming after these injuries where he's seeing both these players. I think Jaire's career might be dwindling towards the end here, and that's a sad thing to say because of all the great years that Alexander did have for Green Bay. He was one of those top corners that Green Bay really needed, and really the only top defensive back pick that they've had until this past year, with Evan Williams at safety, and hopefully Javon Bullard can turn up to something. But at corner, they've missed so many times, Green Bay has, but Jaire was that one home run pick that they really needed. The leader of that defense, of course, there are some problems on and off the field last year, but he was able to bounce back, still be one of those leaders of the team coming into this year. And now it's a question mark as if he's going to suit up in the green and gold once again. So a sad situation. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. I'm going to say it again, but there's some funky stuff that was happening with this Jaire Alexander injury situation, and a little bit to be desired here on this Packers defense when it comes to the cornerback room. I will also say that the cornerbacks could be helped out a lot more if the pass rush would be able to do a little bit more. And this actually brings me to a whole nother topic where Rashawn Gary actually made the Pro Bowl this year. We have given him so much crap earlier this year on the podcast. He has not played well, but he did make a Pro Bowl because of name recognition. But if that Packers pass rush is there, then you don't need the cornerback help as much. It's just the symbiotic relationship between those two. If you have covered corners, you have more opportunity to get sacks because guys aren't open. Or if you're getting a pass rush, there isn't a lot of time to throw, so the cornerbacks don't have to do their job as well. So Green Bay can start to solve this problem, and I see Hafley trying to do it with his blitz packages. You saw it in that Minnesota game. Very often they were bringing an extra guy or two extra guys to go to try to get the quarterback, but still not enough pressure. Darnold was able to sit back there, wait, watch his guys get open and deliver strikes. That defensive front, that pass rush is going to need to be better. But both position groups, your pass rush and your cornerbacks, they're going to have to be better if you want to see this team go in the Super Bowl. Like these are the two problems that we're seeing with this team, and Jordan Love has to play better as well. We said that on Monday. But the thing is, this team has the ability, I do believe. The guys just have to play well. And it's very hard to get through an entire playoff stretch where everybody plays well. And even as Packer fans, you've seen so many great teams go through this stretch where it can feel like everybody's there and everybody's healthy. And I go back and I think of 2014 all the time when you had Julius Peppers, Charles Woodson, Clay Matthews, and everybody on that defense. And then you had Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, and everybody on the offensive side of the ball, and they still weren't able to get through and go to the Super Bowl. It's an extremely tough thing, and it does take a little bit of luck. So maybe the Packers can be the lucky guys this year. Maybe they go in and both Minnesota and Detroit learns how hard it is to beat a good team 3 times in a year. I'm not writing Green Bay off by any means, but just like anybody, it is going to be a tough road to the Super Bowl, and you're going to have to see those guys play better. It's a good organization. We're going to have a lot of years, I believe, with this group here, and I think Jordan Love is going to be there for a long time, and I really do trust in LaFleur. I trust in Gutekunst. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for this Green Bay team, and they're just getting another bite at the apple this year here in 2024. So we're now into 2025, looking on towards the playoffs. The Packers will be taking on the Bears on Sunday. They've had some injuries in the last couple of weeks. It was reported that the first couple of practices this week, we have not seen Anderson, Cox Jr., Quay Walker, Christian Watson, or Evan Williams. Neither of them have practiced yet. Anderson is Zane Anderson, the safety who's had to step in for an Evan Williams who's been dealing with a concussion. Matt LaFleur did say that they would play the starters this week. They are trying to win this game. It is an important game when it comes to playoff seeding. Right now, it's looking like Green Bay is going to have to travel to Philly and take on the Eagles team that they've lost to earlier this season. But if they want to play either the NFC West or the NFC South division champion, they would need to beat the Bears, number one. And number two, the less likely, is for the Cowboys to beat the Commanders, which is a very possible thing, and it could happen. But right now it's looking like Green Bay is going to play Philly, but they have to go out and win this game if they want to give themselves a chance to not have to play the Eagles in the first round. So LaFleur's taking that the way that he should. He's saying the starters are going to play, and it's not a must-win game, so if there are some guys on the fence, I wouldn't expect for them to be pushing anybody too hard to go out and play in this game, because this is a Bears team that has really been down in the dumps ever since they've fired their head coach and their offensive coordinator. They've had very little identity on the offense. Things are bad. It looks like a lot of those players don't even want to be there. So I'm not saying that it's going to be an easy win, because no win in the NFL is truly all that easy. But Green Bay, even without, you could take out all of those guys, I still think with the Josh Jacobs there, I think you can beat almost anybody, especially a Bears team that is as low morale as it is where it stands right now. So Packers taking on the Bears on Sunday. The Milwaukee Bucks are 17-15. They had a loss yesterday, 113-110 to the Brooklyn Nets. It's a game that should have been winnable. They shot 68% from the free throw line, were 19 from 28, so they just needed to hit 4 more of those, which is very possible for an NBA squad, but came up a little bit short, up to 17-15. They are 3-4 since the NBA Cup, but they have a chance to bounce back. Tomorrow they'll take on the 11-22 Trailblazers at home. That game will tip off at 7 p.m. So you got Bucks, you got the Packers, and that should be a good weekend for us. A Packers-Bears weekend. You can never complain. We'll have that game on Sunday. We'll have the Bucks on Saturday. And Sam and I will be back on Monday for our final regular season NFL reactions. Make sure you tune in. And remember, you can always find us on YouTube or Spotify. Like, follow, do all the good stuff. I'm Cody Depius, and I thank you for being here with us on the first Friday of 2025. We'll be back next week for hopefully a Packers victory over the Chicago Bears. This has been another edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.